Imagine a place where Christmas is not wrapped in warmth, laughter, and glowing lights, but buried under endless darkness, silence, and something far older than joy. A place where the snow doesn't just fall, it hides things. Where the mountains don't just stand, they watch. And where children don't dream of gifts, they fear being taken. Before we begin, if you are drawn to dark truths, forgotten legends, and stories that blur the line between myth and reality, make sure you subscribe to the Grim Tapes. Because what you're about to hear is not the Christmas story you grew up with. In most parts of the world, December is magical. Families gather, children laugh, and a red-suited man delivers gifts under the cover of night. But in Iceland, the story is different. There, Christmas once carried a warning. A threat. A presence lurking in the frozen wilderness. Her name is Gryla. And she is not here to give. She is here to take. Deep within Iceland's jagged highlands, where volcanic rock cuts through frozen landscapes and the wind howls like something alive, stories began to form centuries ago. Not stories meant to entertain, but stories meant to control. To shape behavior. To instill fear so deep that it would echo in the minds of children long after the snow melted. Gryla was not described as human. She was something else entirely. A towering giantess with grotesque features, her body twisted by hunger and age. Some legends say she had 3 eyes, each one seeing into places no human should. Others describe her claws as long and curved, perfect for tearing through flesh. Her teeth, jagged and blackened, built not for biting, but for ripping. But the most horrifying detail was not her appearance. It was her appetite. Gryla fed on children. Not just any children, but those who disobeyed. In a land where survival depended on discipline, obedience, and harsh realities, Gryla became more than a story. She became a tool. A living warning whispered by parents during long, dark winters. If you don't behave, Gryla will come for you. And in the pitch-black nights of Iceland, where the sun barely rises and shadows stretch endlessly, that warning felt real. Children would lie awake, listening to the wind scraping against wooden walls, imagining footsteps outside. Heavy. Slow. Deliberate. The kind of footsteps that didn't belong to something human. And somewhere out there, they believed she was watching. But Gryla did not come alone. She had 13 sons. The Yule Lads. Today, they are often portrayed as mischievous pranksters. Playful figures who leave small gifts or harmless tricks. But their origins were far darker. Each of the Yule Lads had a specific, unsettling behavior. They weren't kind. They weren't cheerful. They were invasive. Disturbing. Almost predatory in their actions. One would sneak into homes to steal food, leaving families hungry in a land where starvation was a real threat. Another would slam doors in the dead of night, creating terror without explanation. One would peer through windows, watching families from the outside, his presence silent and unnatural. But these were not just random acts. They were reminders. Reminders that you were not alone. That something could enter your home at any moment. That safety was an illusion. And above them all, was their mother. Gryla didn't just punish. She collected. Legend says she carried a massive sack. Not filled with toys. Not filled with gifts. But filled with bones. Children who misbehaved were taken. Stuffed into that sack. Carried away into the mountains where no one would hear them scream. And there, in a dark cave hidden beneath layers of ice and rock, Gryla would cook them alive. Imagine the psychological weight of that story on a child. This wasn't a distant fairy tale. It was immediate. Personal. A consequence tied directly to behavior. Disobedience wasn't just wrong, it was deadly. But there's another part of the legend. One that made the fear even more suffocating. The Christmas cat. Unlike Gryla, this creature didn't hunt based on behavior. It hunted based on status. The story goes that anyone who didn't receive new clothes before Christmas would be devoured by this massive, shadow-like cat. A creature that prowled the snowy landscapes, its eyes glowing in the dark, searching for those who lacked. On the surface, it sounds strange. But beneath it lies something deeply rooted in survival. In old Icelandic society, producing new clothes before winter was essential. It meant you had worked. That you had contributed. That you deserved to survive. If you didn't, you were seen as a burden. The Christmas cat became a symbol of that harsh truth. And just like Gryla, it turned fear into motivation. Work hard, or be consumed. Behave, or be taken. These weren't just stories. They were survival mechanisms wrapped in horror. Over time, as Iceland modernized, these legends softened. The Yule Lads became friendlier. Gryla faded into the background. The Christmas cat became more symbolic than threatening. But something interesting happened. The fear never fully disappeared. Even today, in a country filled with modern cities and advanced technology, these stories are still told. Not with the same intensity, but with the same underlying tension. Because at their core, these legends tap into something universal. The fear of being watched. The fear of being judged. The fear that something, somewhere, is keeping track of your actions. And that fear is timeless. Now think about this. Why did these stories survive? Why didn't they fade completely like so many other myths? Maybe it's because they serve a purpose beyond entertainment. Maybe they reflect something real about human nature. Or maybe, they remind us that fear is one of the most powerful tools ever created. Because when you truly believe something is out there, watching you, waiting for you, you behave differently. You think differently. You live differently. And that's exactly what these stories were designed to do. But here's where it gets even darker. Some historians suggest that Gryla's legend may be far older than the Christmas traditions it's now tied to. That she may have originated as a pagan entity. A spirit of winter. A force of nature given form. If that's true, then Gryla wasn't created to scare children. She was created to explain something far more terrifying. The unforgiving brutality of winter itself. In Iceland, winter wasn't just cold. It was deadly. Food was scarce. Days were short. The environment was relentless. People didn't just fear the dark. They feared what the dark represented. And Gryla became that fear. A living embodiment of hunger. Of loss. Of the idea that nature itself could take you without warning. So when children heard about her, they weren't just hearing a story. They were hearing a reflection of the world they lived in. A world where survival was never guaranteed. Now ask yourself this. What happens when a story like that is passed down for generations? When fear is embedded so deeply into culture that it becomes part of identity? Does it ever truly disappear? Or does it just evolve? Because even today, we still use fear. Not in the same way. Not with giantesses and shadowy cats. But the concept remains. Warnings. Consequences. Invisible lines we're told not to cross. And sometimes, we don't even question them. So here's something to think about. If you had grown up in a place where Gryla was real to you, where every shadow could hide something watching, would you behave differently? Would you believe differently? And more importantly, would you ever truly stop looking over your shoulder? Because maybe the most terrifying part of this story isn't Gryla herself. It's the idea that fear can be shaped, controlled, and passed down so effectively that it becomes reality in the minds of those who hear it. And once that happens, it never really leaves. Before you go, take a moment and think carefully. Do you believe these stories were just meant to scare children, or do you think they reveal something deeper about how fear is used to control behavior? And if something like Gryla existed in your world, not as a creature, but as an idea, would you even recognize it? If you found this story unsettling, make sure you subscribe to the Grim Tapes for more deep, disturbing truths hidden within myths, legends, and real-world mysteries. Like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and tell me what you think. Was Gryla just a story, or something much darker buried beneath centuries of tradition? Because the more you look into these legends, the more they start looking back at you.